Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph.
And I'm MD.
Today we have two cases for you guys, but the first one is eerily similar to the Naziah Harris case. I thought I would start there. You guys have begged for us to cover the Naziah Harris case, and we will get there. Today it's a 2-for-1.
Let's go. So grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, and your wine if it's the evening. But either way, let's get into it.
I've entitled today's case, Hidden in Plain Sight. On a seemingly ordinary day, December 19th, unfolded with Kim fulfilling her routine responsibilities. After sending her children off to school with a wave and a smile, she settled into her workday. However, everything changed when a call shattered the calm. Her daughter, Iyanna, had not gotten off the bus and was nowhere to be found. Anxious and confused, Kim attempted to reach Iyanna on her cell phone, but her calls went straight to voicemail, a highly unusual occurrence for her typical reliable daughter. Just to ensure that there hadn't been a mix-up, she frantically called Iyanna's sister and also called Iyanna's aunts, which were Kim's sisters. But after a while, the family members got back in contact with her and said, hey, I'm on my way up to school. And one of her aunts, Iyanna's aunts, went ahead and decided to contact 911. Kim immediately got off of work as she was distressed and confused to where her daughter was. After a thorough investigation, they unearthed unsettling news. Iyanna had skipped her last 2 classes and was captured on surveillance cameras leaving the school premises at 11 a.m. She was dressed in a white sweatshirt, complete with a pink logo and light blue jeans. Carrying 2 large bags, she left the camera's view, making it impossible to spot the person who picked her up. The unsettling question lingered, did Iyanna leave voluntarily or was something amiss at her home? While the police initially treated the situation as a potential runaway case because they saw her just leaving the school with her belongings and literally checking out, the family's concern deepened. The police thought that it was a runaway situation. This prompted Kim, Iyanna's mother, to perform her own search. After 2 long days with no word, the authorities reclassified the case as a missing person, indicating the gravity of the situation. As Kim sorted through the shared bedroom that Iyanna shared with her sister, she stumbled across an unsettling realization that many of Iyanna's personal belongings, particularly her treasured Victoria's Secret items, were missing. The 2 bags Iyanna carried began to fill Kim with dread. As she reflected on her daughter's responsible nature, she couldn't fathom that Iyanna could leave without notice.
Then Kim's world tilted again when she discovered a password-protected Word document in the recycling bin, which raised red flags. And this is the recycling bin on her computer. It was a lengthy message revealing Iyanna's heartfelt emotions toward someone named Jose, detailing how he had broken her heart back in February and March of 2018. This discovery left Kim reeling. The bond she shared with Iyanna had always felt strong, and she believed they communicated openly about everything. Yet the reality of the situation was beginning to paint a more complex and alarming picture, leaving Kim to grapple with the mother's worst nightmare. Was the daughter she thought she knew truly in pain and feeling lost? Before we move on, let's discuss this a little bit. Steph, what do you think about just this idea that she felt like she had a really open relationship with her daughter, and yet she realizes there was things she really didn't know?
We have to, one of the things that we try to do on this platform is come up with thought-provoking questions inside of our case that make you think or that just need to be talked about, and we want to engage with you guys and see what you think. But I personally believe that a lot of times parents, they believe that they have this close relationship with their daughter or their child. And I think they have some, not all, can have some, they're just naive to the fact that, one, you were once a teenager. And on a psychological basis, if you've ever taken Psychology 101, you know that kids have a predisposition to be close in their formative years, like when they're babies, toddlers, elementary school, they're probably the most close to you then. But as they matriculate through middle school, their confidants are their peers. That's who they're going and they're telling everything to that person or to those people. And I do think that you can still have a close relationship with a parent, but you shouldn't be naive to the fact that they're not telling you everything. And that doesn't have to mean they're not telling you the worst of things. They just may not tell you everything because, to them, they know it all. They got it under control. And then some of it may be like a worst case scenario. Like, I'm going through this and I don't know how my mom's reaction would be. But I still think you can be close, but you shouldn't be naive to think that they're telling you everything.
I agree with you, Steph. I think that's spot on. And that's something I hope as parents, as we're navigating and getting ready to go into these high school years, that we keep in mind. I think it's hard to remember that we were once teenagers too. Well, let's talk a little bit more about who Iyanna was. So Iyana Sawyer was a radiant 16-year-old in 2018. She was the pride of her family, and she was a dedicated sophomore at Terry Park High School. As the firstborn, she had always set a high expectation for herself, and she achieved straight A's while juggling college courses that would allow her to graduate early. Dreams of becoming a doctor or a lawyer danced around in her mind, and scholarship offers were beginning to roll in. Charismatic and caring, Iyanna was cherished by her family, especially her mother and younger cousins. She was outgoing and full of life, and she seemed destined for greatness. However, as midterms approached in December 2018, Iyanna harbored a significant secret that weighed heavily on her young shoulders. One evening, she mustered the courage to reveal to her mother the news that would simply alter their lives forever. She was pregnant. The revelation left her mother reeling because the idea of her daughter, who had always been so focused on her education and future, now facing an unexpected journey into motherhood, was at the bare minimum overwhelming. Together, confronted the reality of Iyanna's pregnancy, realizing the profound implications it held for her future. Despite the initial shock, her mother's support was unwavering. And kudos to her mom. Because you can be disappointed, but you also have to realize you got to support your child. She promised to do whatever it took to ensure that both Iyanna and her unborn child would have the brightest future possible.
On December 13, 2018, Iyanna and her mother visited the OBGYN office to check on the health of both mother and baby. As they sat in the waiting room, nerves mingled with anticipation, just trying to figure out how far along she was, because she really didn't know, because she had been keeping this a secret. The moment they learned that Iyanna was 5 months pregnant and she was expecting a little girl, it was just a rush of emotions, having to navigate through, okay, you're not just 2 to 3 weeks pregnant, you're now 5 months pregnant. And also we know the sex of the baby had to be exciting. Iyanna decided on the name Hazel Michelle Mobley, a name that would carry the love of both mother and grandmother. While the initial shock of the unexpected pregnancy left both her mother and her grappling with the uncertainty, as they settled into the new reality, a sense of joy blossomed in their hearts. And I think that can happen with an unexpected pregnancy. Like, you have all of this anxiety and anticipation, but then once you settle into the reality, I'm gonna have this baby, and then think about this baby and this new life growing inside of you, I think that it can be a great thing. Iyanna began to envision the joy of a child, what it could bring to her life. Love, laughter, reminding her that while the road ahead would be challenging, it was also brimming with hope and beautiful possibilities. Iyanna and her mother were ready for this baby. Kimberly asked her, who was the father? Because that's a natural question, right? Like, who should we be expecting for him to be in the pregnancy and be involved? And she mentioned that it was a boy named Jose. In terms of conception, her mother counted it up and she surmised that she more than likely conceived in July. Now, during this time, she went out of town and traveled to go visit her grandparents. And her mother just thought that this was a boy out of town. Maybe it was a one-night stand, somebody she met. She didn't push too hard on that because up until this point, Iyanna hadn't had any true boyfriends at that time. But there was some skepticism from her mother because earlier that year, Iyanna was involved with a neighbor. And this neighbor was 20 years old, wildly inappropriate. But at the time, Iyanna was 15. And when her mother found out about this situation, she went ahead and reported the incident to the police and pressed charges. And as a result of her pressing charges, they had to do a rape kit at the hospital. And this guy's name was Kamar Humphrey. He had to be listed on the child sex registry list. And shortly after the incident took place, he ended up moving away. But she kind of was thinking, could this be a cover up for Kamar? And she's saying that it's Jose, like this guy that was out of town. However, fast forwarding to the situation where Iyanna has disappeared, this is a question that investigators had because, of course, her mother gave them not only the information that was in the recycling bin on the laptop, and that was very troubling for Kim because she was trying to figure out, is Jose a real person? Who is this Jose guy? Because I thought he was just transient. What's going on? And when the police found out about the Kamar situation, which was very troubling as well, they knew they had to reach out to Kamar to see if he was actually the baby's father and was she with him. Well, they talked to Kamar and they were able to rule him out as a suspect because he was actually out of town when Iyanna disappeared.
As the investigation into Iyanna's disappearance unfolded, a close friend came forward with some chilling information regarding a conversation that she remembered having with Iyanna before she went missing. Iyanna had confided in her friend that she planned to stay with a man named Jonathan Quillis for about 2 weeks. This revelation shocked the family as Jonathan was Iyanna's uncle. He was married to Kim's sister, Naomi, Iyanna's aunt's husband. They had been married for 5 years and they were expecting their second child together. The family had a history with Jonathan. Iyanna and her sister regularly babysat for his family and frequently spent time at their home, especially as Naomi's demanding job as a truck driver required her to be away for long stretches of time. The dynamic shifted when, at the end of 2017, Jonathan suffered a broken femur, and this basically increased Iyanna and her sister's responsibility to help out at their aunt's house. Now, despite this being a trusted family member, Jonathan raised eyebrows within the family. Naomi, aware of the murmurs and rumors surrounding Jonathan's behavior, allegedly even questioned Iyanna and her sister about any inappropriate actions that maybe Jonathan took when it came to the girls. But both girls were adamant and denied any misconduct. And Naomi, chose to stay with Jonathan as a result. She felt like, okay, I'm going to come to these girls and I'm going to see if they have any allegations against my husband. And if they do, then I'm going to leave. But if they don't, I guess she decided she was going to stay.
Yeah, I'm going to stop here and say that that's bizarre.
I knew you were going to stop here, and I knew you were going to say that's bizarre.
Because that's a bold allegation. To come to your husband or to come to your nieces and say, has my husband been inappropriate with you sexually or in any kind of way? Because that means that thought has
crossed your mind. You must feel there is something inappropriate. You may have observed something that just seemed off to you.
Right.
I guess
but before you finish your thought, also to tell them if there is, I'm going to leave. This is on me if something happens.
Exactly, Steph. That was my point. That was my next point. I'm glad you hit it. I feel like you can't expect that a kid is always going to be truthful in that kind of a situation because they may have fear that you're not going to believe them, or they may have fear that there will be repercussions. And so you just cannot always just immediately believe what they're saying. You gotta, I don't know. I just think that
it's just interesting that she dismissed it and continued her marriage and then got pregnant. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
It's just like, we don't know what she was thinking, but
yeah, it is. And I guess you're looking at it from the lens of how I would handle it. And I think whenever you feel like you would handle something different, you're like, and so it just looks weird. And this also, as a result, complicated the family's trust, right? When she ended up staying, the family also was kind of looking like, what? Iyanna's grandmother had noticed a lingering hug between Iyanna and Jonathan, which she felt was inappropriate. And, this just added to this mounting unease that the family had with Jonathan, that maybe something wasn't quite right. So days after revealing her pregnancy to the family, an aunt in a group chat insinuated that Iyanna's baby's father, Jose, and I'm putting that in like air quotes, Jose, was really Jonathan Quillis. Now, this revelation left Iyanna flustered, and in a moment of defiance, she insisted that they could do a DNA test to sort out the matters. And on December 23rd, investigators visited the Quillis home seeking answers. Jonathan and Naomi claimed ignorance regarding Iyanna's whereabouts. They were like, we don't know. We have no clue what's going on. We don't know where she is. And they also expressed concern over her disappearance while posting about it on social media. Naomi insisted she couldn't believe her husband would harm her niece. Like, I can't believe this. This is not like him, okay? During the search of their home, the investigators were asking, like, is there anything missing in your home? And Jonathan mentions that there were 38 pairs of his wife's Victoria's Secret underwear that was missing. I mean, you guys, he mentioned it down to the number precisely 38 on the dot. 38 pairs of missing underwear, of his wife's missing underwear. Steph, I mean, seriously, what do you think about that?
That's a red flag for me, because you might say, the last time that she was over here, I believe she might have took some of my wife's panties that we just bought. But to say, and it was 38 pairs. That is odd. Another oddity, but we have to call it out.
Investigators, they take that down, and they note that in their records. And then Jonathan was interviewed by detectives, and he maintained an air of this grieving uncle persona while denying any sexual relationship with Iyanna. Jonathan did also give his DNA, and it was processed quickly as the case was handed off to the homicide team. Because at this point, she's been missing so long that they're assuming that she possibly could be dead. DNA samples were processed and compared to the rape kit, and that was processed months earlier in the case of Kamar. So remember, she had an inappropriate relationship with this 20-year-old neighbor, Kamar. They did a rape kit on Iyanna, and so they compare Jonathan's DNA to this rape kit. And on January 7th, the investigation took a horrific turn when Jonathan's brother, Joseph, approached the police with a shocking confession. He disclosed that Jonathan had called him 4 times between December 19th and 20th, revealing that he, Jonathan Quillis, had gotten Iyanna pregnant, and that he, fearing for his life after luring her to a dump site with false promises, Jonathan admitted to strangling Iyanna, then shooting her, ending her life and the life of her unborn daughter.
Jonathan's meticulous planning came to light. He intended for Iyanna to terminate the pregnancy, but felt cornered when she refused. Joseph's testimony and the DNA evidence that Jonathan willingly turned in, he went from the grieving uncle to a prime suspect, because that DNA evidence that he submitted and that was compared to the case of Kamar, his DNA was found in Iyanna's underwear. But also, there was an unknown male DNA found in her underwear as well. Plot twist. When Jonathan submitted his DNA, it came up positive. She was having sex with both of them at that time. Now, he was brought back in for questioning, but continued to deny any wrongdoing, even in the face of all this overwhelming evidence. We have your DNA. We also have your brother, who has turned to us, and he's a witness.
Yeah, he has turned state witness.
Right. And so they say, you are basically going down. On January 8th, he was indicted on the charges of sexual battery because they couldn't definitively tie him to the disappearance or murder, foul play. They couldn't file.
Yeah, they didn't have enough evidence with just, his brother's testimony. Like, where's the body? Where's anything that shows that he did take her? We don't have enough. They were like, well, we do have enough on this sexual battery because we got your DNA.
And just like similar to last week's case with Avis,
they initially just held her on accessory after the fact. Because
right,
it's like, this is what we have the evidence on. So, but it was once because he's like, let's get you arrested, let's get you indicted, let's get you held. And then as we build the case and we collect more evidence, then we can charge you for more.
This was the case for Jonathan. Now, if you guys, which I highly encourage you, it's all on Crime TV. They have interviews of him giving interviews to the detectives. And he's very talkative, overly talkative. And they figure that if he is not telling us anything, maybe he will tell somebody else. And he was very steadfast in his assertion of innocence. But they figured out that they could get him to talk. But meanwhile, in between time, Iyanna's sister, who we will not mention her name because she is still underage, also confessed to her mother during this time that Jonathan had been sexually inappropriate with her as well, starting at the age of 13. And that Iyanna and Jonathan had this secret relationship for the past 2 years that was sexual. Her sister also said that she was scared to come forward with this relationship because she was scared what her uncle would do in retaliation, but she also wanted to hold her sister's confidence. She wanted to be the confidant for her sister. And she confirmed that Jose was Jonathan. That was their secret name for him. They knew based on that information that this is Jose. Jose is Jonathan. They obviously have been having this relationship. Detective Abbott, who was in charge of the case on the homicides end, got in contact with an inmate and they wired him up. They wanted to probe Jonathan to see if, in fact, he would talk. And he did. He claimed that he did kill Iyanna because she was pregnant. And that if that came to light, if that surfaced, then it was going to essentially ruin his life. He claimed he took her out to his job, which he worked at a junkyard, and he killed her off camera. They compare everything that Jonathan says to this jailhouse snitch to what was said in Jonathan's brother's testimony, and it matches. This was confirmed that he did work at the junkyard. They pulled the footage, the surveillance footage, and it showed him leaving around 11:17 a.m. If you remember, Iyanna left school at 11 a.m. He leaves and he stays gone for about an hour. So he has enough time, they believe, to drive, bring her back to the junkyard. And although they see him coming back in through surveillance footage, he often goes to places in the junkyard that they don't have any cameras there. They're not able to definitively say, yeah, we see her in the car. But based on what Joseph said to detectives is that he planned to kill her, number one, but also not only did he plan it, he picked her up from the school. He takes her back to the junkyard, and off camera, he tries to strangle her. but he can't. He says that he got sick and it just wasn't working, according to him. And he also repeats this to the jailhouse informant as well. He also tells his brother that then he pulls out the gun and he shoots her in the chest. Then he removes her body from the car, dumps it into a dumpster, and then he destroys the vehicle that he used to kill her. In the search that they initially did on his home, they did find a gun. But one would think that if you shoot somebody in close range, obviously there's going to be blood on the gun. But there wasn't. And they could tell that that gun had been fired, but he had like a receipt of going to the gun range. And so the fact that they couldn't really definitively say this is the gun that was used because we found blood on it, they couldn't connect that gun to the actual crime. And since he's had, a receipt of going to the gun range, they couldn't say it was not recently fired. So when they find out all of this information based on what Joseph said and what was repeated on the wire, they decide that they need to try to find Iyanna. They go to the landfill because actually the dumpster that he placed her in was picked up the very next day. There was just a lot of time that had went by. This happened in December. They started looking for her in January. I just want you guys to put that into perspective. So they go to the landfill and they spend $1.5 million over 3 weeks digging through over 8 feet deep trash. But they found nothing to tie Quillis directly to Iyanna or Iyanna to Quillis. But they do find some Victoria's Secret clothing. And they found textbooks from Terry High School. But it wasn't any physical evidence that connected this murder. However, the confirmation of him being Jose, wiretap evidence, and also his brother's account was enough to charge Jonathan. So on January 18th, they charged Jonathan with 2 counts of first-degree murder because she was pregnant. And they also charged him with sexual battery. But this doesn't go to trial for 4 years. And there wasn't any other evidence that came with this case. This was a circumstantial case in nature, but it was convincing. And because they didn't have a body, he felt like he was going to be able to get away with it. So he pled not guilty. MD, do you want to elaborate on the circumstantial but convincing? Because that also was the case in Naziah Harris' case.
Well, the thing is that I think a lot of people think that circumstantial evidence is not strong evidence. It is strong evidence when you have an overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence. You can I think that there's this, if you are a true crime sleuth, you know this to be true, but there is a false narrative that was pushed for years that if there's no body, there's no crime. That's not true. You don't have to have a body to believe that a person is dead and to be able to convict a person of murder even without the body. I mean, does it make the case harder? Significantly, it does. But if you have an overwhelming amount of circumstantial evidence and all of that circumstantial evidence is strong, I think it's strong evidence that you have the testimony of his brother. It's strong evidence that you have his own confession on a wiretape. It is strong evidence that he was, in fact, Jose. I think that all of those point to him being a murderer and a murderer of Iyanna. So it is okay that it's circumstantial so long as it is strong circumstantial evidence. And in this case, that's exactly what it was. And so the case actually goes to trial on September 14, 2023. And the death penalty was actually also on the table. Now, the prosecution claimed that he killed her because she was underage and she refused to get an abortion. She refused to get rid of the baby. And so he took matters into his own hands and he wanted to ensure he kept his reputation sound. So he killed her. The defense claimed that they had to prove that he was the father. Otherwise, they couldn't prove that he committed a crime because, no body, no crime. How do we even know that this, their argument is, how do we even know that he was the father? How you can't even prove that to us, right? Because we don't have a body. But the prosecution had his brother, and they had that jailhouse informant with the wiretap. She also testified. And initially she was defensive. Like when they first started questioning her right after Iyanna went missing, she was pretty defensive. But in the weeks following Jonathan's arrest and him being in jail, she came around and she changed her mind. And she decided, okay, I'm on the wrong side of things.
What's interesting about her testimony is that she claims that a lot of those rumors and murmurs that MD was talking about, there were some Snapchat messages that came to light. And he was speaking in a very sexual, explicit manner to his nieces, Iyanna and her sister. And it also was aggressive. And she claimed that she knew about those messages and other family members knew about it, but she told him that he just needed to stay away from the girls for a while. And then to also know about the subsequent conversation that she had with her nieces. I just don't know how you were able to dismiss those Snapchat messages and dismiss that conversation that you had with your nieces because you knew that some inappropriate things were going on. Now, she claims she didn't really know exactly what it was and she couldn't understand it all at the time. But that was a part of her testimony, and that part really bothered me, and I thought I should include it in this particular story. She also testified that he was fidgety and anxious prior to the disappearance of Iyanna, which would match him calling his brother and saying he didn't know what he was going to do because he got this young girl pregnant. But then after she went missing, he was now calm, cool, and relaxed. What was really damning in this case was Joseph was not cool and calm about going to the police. It was really a conflict because let me tell you, he got this message about Iyanna on like December 23rd. And he sat on it until January because he felt like, one, is my brother telling the truth? You know, is he making this up? And also I felt that he was just naturally conflicted. Like, this is my brother. And if he did do it, he's going away for life. And he said that when he found out that Iyanna was missing, that's when he made the move to go ahead and seal his brother's fate. And the last text message that he sent to his brother, he told his brother exactly what he was going to do. He said, I can't talk to you right now. I have to stand firm on my decision. What you told me isn't some joke or something you lied about. So yes, I told the police because they need to know. He went on further to explain that he was sorry for telling, but he felt like it was the right thing to do. And Iyanna and her family needed to know if this truly took place, they needed to be at rest. And if he was innocent, it would be proven. This was another interesting tidbit, is that the jailhouse informant that he ended up talking to, they met at a Bible study and they had this conversation in which he ended up talking and revealing his cards. They had that right after they talked about the Bible. They did find him guilty on all counts, and the prosecution was seeking the death penalty, but he received 3 consecutive life sentences. He'll never, ever get out. The family and the state felt that justice was served. Kimberly Mobley, her mother, reflected on her daughter's life during the sentencing phase, recalling that she was her first love and all her dreams and aspirations. She was broken, but appreciative that she had 16 years with her daughter. What we like to do here on Murder in Black is if we have more than one case, we table our takeaway until the very end. And since these cases are very similar, I think it is more than appropriate to wait. Now, the case of Naziah Harris is an interesting one, but I want to make it clear that it just left the preliminary trial phase. It will be going to trial, which is a good thing, but I also want to tell you guys a definition of a preliminary trial. A preliminary trial is commonly referred to as a preliminary hearing. It is a legal proceeding in the criminal justice system designed to determine whether there is sufficient evidence for the prosecution to proceed with formal charges against the defendant. This hearing typically occurs after the arraignment where the defendant pleads not guilty. The primary purpose of a preliminary trial is to assess whether there is a probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed and that the defendant is the one who committed it. Now, I have to say that this preliminary trial was very important because just like the Iyana Stewart case that we just told you about, everything was circumstantial but convincing. So I will simply be laying out to you what happened during this preliminary trial, the facts of the case, and we will hear some evidence and hear from some witnesses. Now, Naziah Harris in 2024 was 13 years old, and she went missing on January 9th of 2024. But I want to give you background. So Naziah lived with her grandmother, Annette Harris, and her aunt, Shannon Harris, who had 5 children. Naziah was adopted by her grandmother in 2016. Her birth mother was alive but not present in the lives of Naziah or her grandmother. Jarvis Roman Butts was the baby father of her aunt, Shannon Harris. Now, this is relevant. He had a total of 13 children. He worked as a mechanic and owned a body shop with his partner named Cordell Wright, and this body shop was very close to where Naziah and her family lived. As I previously just said, Naziah went missing January 9, 2024. And in this preliminary trial, they presented evidence of surveillance footage of Naziah getting off of her school bus and headed in the direction of Jarvis's body shop instead of going home. Cordell Wright testifies that on January 9th, that afternoon, they, meaning him and Jarvis, went to AutoZone to pick up a part for a car. And they ended up circling back around because they left a part. And on their way back to the shop, Jarvis says aloud that he sees his niece. Initially, Cordell doesn't see Naziah. They pick her up and take her back to the body shop. Cordell was not the only person who saw Naziah Harris that day at the body shop. Actually, Jarvis's sister sees Naziah as well. And at the time, she doesn't know that it's Naziah. She just notices that there is a young girl at the shop. She arrives at the shop around 4 p.m. and she notices that this young girl's there going in and out of Jarvis's truck, going back and forth to the gas station, retrieving items. And so she is curious enough to ask Jarvis, who is that girl? And Jarvis says in a roundabout way that was Cordell's niece. She doesn't find this odd. She just goes on about her business. But as more and more details emerge and she talks to his other baby mothers, she realizes that this may be Naziah Harris. And she ends up calling the police and letting them know that she feels like it was Naziah Harris that she saw at the shop for the amount of time that she was there. So, according to the prosecutors, Jarvis is the last person who saw Naziah before she went missing. Now, prosecutors say and allege that Jarvis Butts picked her up and then they left and went to Ypsilanti before returning back to Detroit. And then Butts checked into a motel and they were able to track down more movements, and we'll talk about that in a second. I have to mention that on January 9th, the day that Naziah went missing, Butts was supposed to turn himself in to authorities for a gun charge that's unrelated, obviously, to this particular case. But when he came down that day, which I'm suspecting was that morning, the date was pushed back to February and he was allowed to go free. I think that's an oddity of this case, but a fact that in lieu of everything that I'm about to tell you is interesting. So there is a picture circulating the internet of Naziah. Beautiful picture, but it was taken the last day that Naziah was ever seen alive. And on this picture, I'm going to describe it, and you can see it on our Instagram and or Facebook. But she is smiling. She's a beautiful young girl, and she has glasses on. Well, those glasses are unique in that they have a transparent frame. Well, these glasses come into question from the prosecutors. They put his baby mother on the stand, and she had an interesting story. She said on January 9th, that evening, Jarvis asked to borrow her car. They had a relationship, and she had his son, and he wanted to go on an outing with his son, and so he asked to borrow the car. She said sure. She got home at 9 p.m. He comes, he picks up the car, takes his son, and then returns the car the next morning. So she gets to the shop, and she's just getting her son, getting his belongings, getting everything packed up and ready to go, when her son is in the back seat playing with some translucent frames. And she thinks this is odd, so she grabs the glasses from him and says, "Are these your glasses? Because they're not mine." And he snatches the glasses from her and said, "Oh, this belongs to my other son. Those are his glasses." She doesn't think too much of it, but those glasses that she described looked exactly like the glasses that Naziah was wearing. So the police then pull his phone location data, because they're trying to track down his movements in an attempt to find Naziah and to just establish that there was a connection between the two. They did track down his location to a former golf course there in Detroit. And on the west side is a parking lot, and then it's the former country club, and behind that is what they call the Red River. So they decided to gather cadaver dogs and do an on-foot search of the area. That's when they discover clothing items that they believe belonged to Naziah, because it was the clothes that her family member says she wore last. They found a pink bodysuit. They also found a black hoodie, gloves, red and black and white dunks, and they found a black jacket. And inside of that black jacket, they found earbuds. Now, there were several holes and tears in the clothing of the items that I mentioned. And because of that, they feel like there was some type of struggle that ensued. Now, all of this is very damning evidence. He was the last person seen with her. He went somewhere with her, obviously returned back to Detroit, but then the last place that they find her clothing items is on the banks of the Red River. Up until this point, everything that they have presented is very damning, but they haven't quite established motive. But before we get into the motive of why he would kill Naziah, I want to tell you about who Jarvis Butts was and his criminal history, because he had one. He had a history of targeting and befriending women only to get close to these women so that he could sexually abuse their daughters. Now, he had been charged for sexually abusing 2 other young girls, and he had a conviction that dated back to 2005 for sexual assault. He also assaulted an 8-year-old family member and a girlfriend's 4-year-old daughter who contracted chlamydia from the assault. He was charged on September 27, 2024 as a habitual 4th-time offender. One could even say that he was a serial child rapist. Now, according to Shannon Harris, which it's seen based on her testimony and some of the text messages that came out, that they were in somewhat of a relationship, that at the very least they were still in some type of sexual relationship outside of the children that they had. Shannon Harris testified that up until the point where Naziah went missing, she felt that Naziah's relationship with Jarvis was a regular uncle-niece relationship. However, she at some point looked in Naziah's tablet, and it was in the year that she went missing, 2024. She went and saw in Instagram that Naziah had been passing messages between Jarvis and herself. And when she looked at those messages, she was particularly concerned about two. There was a message that contained a picture, and she said she couldn't manage to really decipher what the picture was. She only knew that, for the most part, that it was sent. And then there was a message. Now, she didn't reveal what the message was. She said it wasn't sexually explicit in nature, but it concerned her enough to make a phone call to Jarvis. And she asked him, why was he sharing messages between her niece? And he said that he doesn't remember any messages. But when she pinpointed what the messages were, he said, well, maybe it was just our kids. Like, they were using my phone and they messaged Naziah. And she said, no, because I know how my kids talk, and the nature of the text message, it does not sound like it would come from my kid or any of my kids. And that was pretty much her testimony at the time, that there was enough concern that she had a conversation with him about those text messages, but nothing really came of it. But thankfully, the police were able to recover text messages that they presented in court. And I'm going to read the transcript of those text messages to you. Now, for the purposes of reading the transcript, I will refer to Naziah as her last name, Harris, and Butts, which is Jarvis's last name. The text messages begin in September of 2022 and extend all the way into the last day that Naziah was seen. September 27th, 2022. Harris, come on. Harris, you okay? Harris, where are we doing it at? Your choice. But you tell me. Harris, basement. Harris, you sure? Harris, hand job? Butts, can you suck my, please? Butts, and make sure you erase the messages. Harris, okay, that is what I plan to do. June 5th, 2022. Butts, I'm at your house. Harris, damn, we were just there. Harris, you better not be in my room. Harris, I need another phone. Harris, I miss you. Butts, I stole your panties. June 24th, 2023. Butts, send me some pictures, please. Harris, don't you still got the other pics? Butts, no. Harris, I will send some. June 27th, 2023. Butts, are you naked yet? Harris, no, I don't want to get naked. Harris, are you mad I didn't get naked? Butts, I used to you telling me no. Harris, come on, babe, I'm sorry, just not in the mood right now. I'm sorry. September 26, 2023. Harris, babe, you up? Harris, question mark. Harris, yeah. Harris, my period haven't came at all. Harris, hello, you there? Butts, what you mean? Harris, it have not came. Butts, since when? Harris, since I was in the hospital. Butts, that was last month. Harris, I'm scared. IDK, what to do? I have to go to the doctor's tomorrow. Butts, you said you took a pregnancy test and it was negative. Harris, it did. Butts, so go get another one. Harris, I can't, I have no money. Harris, you get one. Harris, you ain't scared to get a plan B? Get a pregnancy test and bring it later today. Just act like you have to use the bathroom. Harris, please, will you do it? Hello? Butts, okay. November 27, 2023. Harris, I just want to talk. I really don't want to lose you. Harris, can we talk later, yes or no? Harris, I don't want your problem, but I need you to bring me what I need tonight. It's hard doing all this gym with this baby, and if I don't do them, I'm going to get an F. January 9th, 2024. The final text exchange between Butts and Harris before she disappeared. Harris, don't forget, be there before 3. I will let you know when I'm leaving the school. If you're not there, I will wait. Harris, send okay if you see this message so I can delete your number. Butts, okay. Now let me remind you that these text messages began in 2022. She might have been 11. We definitely know they were having sex when she was 12. She went missing at 13. This man was 40 years old. So obviously all of this preliminary trial that I just told you guys went forward. And if you're interested and you want to watch the full length, I believe they have it on Crime TV on YouTube. They have the full length preliminary trial. But I'm happy to say that the judge went ahead and said that this was more than enough evidence to go to trial, and he will be going to trial. And I'm hoping that it is speedy and quick. I do have a takeaway for this case, and right after I will be playing a very short clip of what the judge had to say when she made her decision. The case of Naziah Harris and Iyana Stewart illustrate a troubling failure in our responsibility to protect our children, particularly our daughters. In both situations, there were significant red flags raised by family members who, instead of taking decisive action, merely asked insufficient follow-up questions regarding the troubling behaviors they observed. This negligence toward vulnerable children demonstrates a lack of the protective instincts expected from adults in such circumstances. In both cases, Naziah and Iyanna were targeted and groomed to believe they were engaged in a legitimate relationship, having been manipulated into trusting individuals who represented false ideas of safety and care. This resulted in a painful loss of their innocence that left way before they disappeared, suggesting that the real danger often lies within familiar circles, family members or friends we assume we can trust, and not the stranger who we believe is lurking outside of our door. The absence of protective measures allowed these young girls to be exploited in ways that could have been prevented. We must reflect on our responsibilities toward our children. As my mother often advises me and has advised me when I was young and told me it's something that she did, it is your responsibility to truly know your child. You are to study your child and monitor their well-being. Be attuned to any signs of distress, because while we love to talk about having discussions with our children, the facts remain that children sometimes don't cry out by talking. Sometimes it is the subtle changes in their behavior and the way they walk and how they say they don't want to go to destinations and they just don't want to go and they don't have an exact reason why. Those are the things that you have to be tuned into and made aware of when you are dealing with children, and not just your own children, but children in general. We have a responsibility to ensure the safety of all children. Recognizing anything that may be wrong or any red flags that may be going off in their behavior are indicators that should not be dismissed. Instead, we must act on them, because it is always the priority to ensure the safety and well-being of children. And this requires vigilance. We have to be proactive. We have to go with those guttural instincts that we feel. And if it is enough for you to have a subsidiary conversation with someone about their behavior and what you've seen, then that's enough to invoke protective measures to protect our children. We have to ensure that this is no longer a story that we're all familiar with, that this becomes a story that we no longer hear in our community, because not only did Iyanna's family fail her, and I do believe there was failure and blame there, but so did Naziah's family. But the community failed them as well, the people, school counselors, the people around them that saw this behavior that seemed odd and didn't seem right, they failed as well. And we failed. We failed these beautiful young women. And it's not right. And it angers me to have to get on this podcast and talk about these cases. But I know there is a need for us to have conversations surrounding these young girls being entangled in these manipulative grooming situations, and it is in plain sight. It's not hidden. It is not hidden. It's in plain sight.
The prosecution is correct. You do not have to have a body to establish first-degree premeditated murder. It would have been a much shorter exam to have her body been found, but this is where we are. In the last 365 days, no text messages. We all heard today and yesterday that she was very active and frequently texting. No social media for a year. We heard through testimony that she was also active on social media. No phone calls, which she was also able to do according to testimony. No physical sighting of her by anyone. She never came back to school. No one has seen her. Medical records dated from July 2014 to October 2023 indicated that she had no life-threatening medical issues that would lead to a natural cause of death. While this is still probable cause, the evidence all points to Jarvis Butts. His locations, him being seen with her last, the abortion searches, the abrupt silence between the two of them in text messages, and the constant lies he told throughout the entire investigation. We may never know what happened, but from what I heard today and over the last 4 or 5 days, it appears he intended to perform what he thought was a do-it-yourself abortion on Naziah. They went south, and instead of seeking medical attention for her, he intentionally killed her and tried his best to cover it up. As much as I want her to be alive today, there is at least probable cause to show and believe that she is dead and that she was murdered by Jarvis Butts. Mr. Butts, stand up. You've been sitting over there for 4 days with your head down, sitting between and behind your attorney with your mask on and taking vigorous notes. I want you to pay attention and listen to everything I have to say. I have been trying to figure out for the last 5 days, you. At one point, I thought you were cognitively impaired in reading up this exam. And that maybe you had the brain of a 10-year-old, and that's why you were doing such things. But as I heard more and more testimony, you're just a true definition of a pedophile. Watching you laugh and brag about all the women you have with different women and the children and the girlfriends, and making babies to groom them, and having them in your presence, cleaning up your shop, and the little girls around you, has landed you here today. You groomed Naziah. You played mind games with her. We all heard that. You controlled her emotionally. She was exposed to so much at such a young age. The text messages between you two were disgusting to hear. And to think that she has you saved in her phone and begged for life. Naziah deserves so much more. And while I mentioned other people that failed her, Jarvis Butts, you are the monster in this whole picture. She did deserve love from her parents and everyone who was in her life. She was ignored, she was neglected, and you took complete advantage of that. She wanted someone to love her, and she will never know what that feels like. Your children deserve more. As much as the defense counsel has raised issues on count one, all that has done is raise the question of fact for the trier of fact, which means that this would be for a jury or a judge to hear in Third Circuit. I pray for the healing of all the victims and the young girls and possibly boys who have come into contact with you. As a community, we should look at this case as a prime example of how much work we have to do when it comes to protecting our children and especially our Black girls.
I highly suggest you guys go and listen to the judge's critique and feedback for Naziah's family, because she definitely pinpointed the grandmother, her aunt, the school counselors, everyone who failed her. And I believe that what she said was correct. And I don't want to echo it and repeat it because I think I've covered that in my own takeaway. But I hope that this gave you guys a clear picture of what's going on in the Naziah Harris case. And I'm looking forward to your feedback, as I really appreciated everybody's feedback on our Instagram post last week about the Avis Banks case. That is our cases for this week. Until next time, this is Murder in the Black.